It's like 88% is the sweet spot. It's like, and everyone's always like, I gave 110%. And I'm like, yeah, mentally, I was there 110%, but physically, I've got to just be a bit under as well.
Hit it! That's what I'm talking about. Wait!
Okay, now, from the beginning.
Hit it, boys.
Well, first off, Jess, thank you so very much for joining me, and welcome to the Art of Awesome podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's nice to chat.
Yeah, this is awesome. So you are a truly dominating force in the slalom kayak scene. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you've won 15 world championship medals, and you're, I think, the winningest athlete in the world champion history, or at least in slalom kayaking, if not all of kayaking. And I don't even know if that spreads beyond all world champions. I'm not sure how that goes into swimming and different things like that. But you also grew up in this really unique environment with like a world champion family. Your dad is 5-time world champion. Your mom's 2-time world champion. Kind of how was that growing up, and like were you just like forced into this like slalom kayaking scene, or how did you get into kayaking? Like, I mean, what are the family dynamics there?
Yeah, I guess in paddling in general, it is a bit of a family sport for a lot of people. I know for you, for the Jacksons, that's an example as well. For me, obviously, both parents being in slalom, and then my mum had me and then went back to train and to compete at the 96 Olympics. So I kind of grew up on the riverbank. But then when we were sort of old enough, my sister and I, to get into sports, it was kind of expected that we would try paddling and just learn the basics so that it could be a fun family activity that we did together. And the kayaks always came with us on holidays. We'd always end up at a lake or by the beach, and the kayaks would come with us. So it was kind of something we didn't love at first. Me personally, I didn't like the flat water. I found it really boring. My dad was always trying to teach me the drills, and I was like, I just want to read my book or go play. And but I was always very competitive and a keen swimmer. Gymnastics, and when I broke my arm doing gymnastics, my physio suggested that I get into kayaking a little bit more for the rehab side of things. And I was about 11, I think, at that stage, and it was the age where I could go on the whitewater in Penrith, where we've got the artificial course.
Yep.
So the timing was sort of in my favor, in that it was also the year the world championships for slalom were in Penrith. So seeing, Robin Bell win a gold medal there, and the greats like Tony Estanguet and Mardikin race out there as well. So I kind of had a few stars align and decided to give it a good crack. And I loved the whitewater and just, the challenge of, overcoming your fear of that first live roll, or, surfing a stopper for the first time. And then I just loved the competitive side of things. I loved the competition and did well in the first few times, and I think that probably helped, to get the motivation going to keep turning up. So my parents ended up coaches, and when I was I guess old enough and good enough, I integrated the Australian system, and mum is now my coach. So now we're here.
That's super cool. Have you ever asked your dad if he like paid the physio to like tell him like, oh no, she needs to kayak now that she's 11 and it's gonna help somehow?
No, but he's actually still my physio. His name's Tony, and he was the physio for the team at the time, the slalom team. So he's probably biased. He was thinking, well, it'd be good rehab, and she could be good at it. Who knows? Yeah. So he's definitely joked that my success is because he encouraged me to get into it after my broken arm.
That's super cool. And having your mom as your coach, does your dad coach then as well, or is it like mainly your mom, or kind of what's the different styles between coaching between your parents?
Yeah, they're very different in terms of their style. I think it's been amazing to have both of their input throughout my career. I did a lot of work with my dad when I was younger, especially around the technique on the flat water. And when I was, before and after school, we would go on the flat water and do some drills together. And he really pushed the good technique from the very start, which helped then my whitewater skills. And mum has sort of taken the lead around the technical and the day-to-day training, but I still kind of look to dad for some guidance around, if I think a move should be done a certain way, and mum disagrees, then I'll go to dad, and he's kind of the mediator.
That's awesome.
So everyone's involved. My sister as well. She's a paddler too, and my training partner and a competitor. So it is really nice to be able to share that with the family. I think mum being my coach, it's not for everyone. I don't think everyone could have their parent as a coach, but our personalities really gel well. And I think that she knows me the best out of anyone and knows how to push me to give my best or snap me out of a bad session. Or I think that's probably one of my advantages, is that she knows me the best to get the best out of me.
That's super cool. So obviously as your coach, she's like helping, and I would imagine, being that she's, two-time world champion, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think she's two-time world champion and bronze medalist as well in the Olympics.
Yeah.
Like, she knows the psychology and probably a lot of like what you're going through, and kind of maybe is able to help kind of relate, and just relate the mental side of kind of sports beyond just the physical side.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And I think that's where I've maybe really worked on in my career, is that mental side, the mental toughness, the things you work on every day at training that mean that you get to the start line of a race and you're confident you've done everything you can. And now it's just having the confidence to get out there and do what you know how to do. And I think Dad, was someone who was well recognized in the slalom community, winning 5 world titles. And back then they were every 2 years. So over 10 years, he was a dominant figure. And the mental, I guess the mental side is what people often talk about with my dad as well. So I'd like to think that I got a little bit of both my mum and my dad, and the best of both. And I think the biggest part is the enjoyment out there. We always make our sessions enjoyable and fun. And there's a lot of hard work, and sometimes there's tears, and we clash, but I think there's always an element of enjoyment, and that's the beauty of our sport. Whether it's slalom or out on the big white water or in a freestyle boat, I think everyone loves that element.
100%. When you're talking about your hard work and stuff like that, can you kind of just run us through a little bit of, and for anybody listening and doesn't know about Jess, you're on the route to the Olympics, which were supposed to happen last year, and now it's kind
of a long route.
yeah. It's been delayed, but it's coming. I mean, the Olympic Committee is, anyway, they're everybody's optimistic that it's happening in July this year. I think it's July, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And kind of what goes into the physical training, diet, kind of all that stuff as an Olympic athlete at your caliber?
Yeah, I guess being our sport is, the thing I love about it is that it's always different, and that variety means that every training day is a little bit different on the water. It's not like you're swimming laps up and down a pool and you've got to hit certain numbers and that's how you get your best. For us, there's a physical component. We work on that in the gym. I do probably 2 to 3 sessions in the gym, and then the physical side will have probably 1 loops session where we do as many laps as possible in that hour and a half time that we get, and that's really working on the aerobic base. And then we'll also do a lot of technical work, so that's where we practice different skills and work on different stroke combinations and different moves that we could do on different features and different gait combinations. So we never know what the course is going to be before a race, so you kind of try different gait combinations and different moves that could come up in a race.
Yep.
And you've got to be, adding to your toolbox that you can do any gait combination out there. So there's a big technical focus. And I do 2 events. So I do the kayak and the canoe. So I've got to kind of split my time between both and make sure I'm working them equally now that they're both Olympic events. We do 5 to 6 sessions on the whitewater, and then some flat water gym cross training like running, or I do Pilates and yoga as well.
Yeah. So would you say that the majority of your training then is on water?
Yeah, I'd say the majority is on water. We'd love to be able to do more than we do, but we're very restrained in that we're on an artificial course and they give us, an hour to an hour and a half a day. And we've got to just smash out as much as we can in that time and make the most of it. And then the rest is a bit of flat water work for the physical side of things. But really, when we're on the whitewater, we try and just, get as much technical stuff as we can. And in Australia, unfortunately, we don't have the luxury of, whitewater abundance everywhere. We have to drive a long way to get good whitewater, and it has to rain the right amount and everything. So, Olympic slalom is mainly on artificial courses, so we train mostly on artificial courses.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And the course there in Penrith is an awesome course for that. It was the Olympic course back in, I don't even remember, 2000. That's when it was. Yeah.
Yes, it's over 20 years old. It's still holding on. And normally we get a lot of internationals come out here to train here and race here in the summer. But this year with COVID, obviously it's a bit dead and quiet. So it does feel a bit sad this year.
Yeah. How has COVID affected? I mean, obviously it affected in the sense that it delayed the whole or postponed the Olympic Games themselves, but how has it affected your training? And I saw like I don't know, a couple social posts that you put up this summer of you like doing some kind of interesting training, like in your boat, like pull-ups and push-ups and I don't know, just all sorts of cool stuff. But has it just, it kind of explain a little bit of how COVID has restricted you and you've kind of just adapt and evolved to that?
Yeah, I think in Australia, we've been fortunate that COVID did hit. We went into lockdown in March, but generally we've had very good, I should say, very good life because we're not very restricted in our day-to-day activities. We might have to wear masks to go to shopping centres and on public transport, but we haven't been in lockdown, or at least my state hasn't been in lockdown that much, whereas some states, Victoria was in lockdown for 6 months of last year with very low case numbers compared to Europe.
Wow.
So generally, we've been able to keep a day-to-day activity that's fairly normal, but we were impacted, and I think I had almost 2.5 months off the water in March, April, May time when they locked us down. And yeah, that's when I was training in the backyard, had the boats out, was using it as weights for pull-ups, was using it for push-ups, got in the pool, did some turns. We got a bit creative and enjoyed that time at home to mix it up and do different things as well. And I think it was the novelty in 2020 of staying home and getting creative, but for that to drag out the whole year, I think would have been quite painful and hard to stay motivated. And I know that's the case for some countries, so I do feel very fortunate that we've been able to train well. And I think the biggest thing for me was the variety and mixing it up. Like, I'm used to going overseas in April and then staying overseas from June till October and training in different places. And the fact that Australia is kind of in the borders are closed meant that we didn't get that variety. So I did manage to get overseas in July to do a bit of training in Europe and some little competitions. And that was really important for me to keep the motivation and keep expanding my skills and stay motivated to get to Tokyo in 2021. So at the moment, we're training normally. We're hoping we get overseas for the World Cups, but then our preparation into the Olympics is looking a bit different because we've got very strict quarantine requirements here. So, we're figuring out, do we go overseas and stay overseas until the Olympics where it's a bit of an uncertain environment, or do we come home and do 2 weeks of hotel quarantine, which means we don't train, but then we're home and we can train afterwards in the lead up to the games. So yeah, I think there's positives and negatives to everyone's situation, and we've just got to focus on what we can do.
Right. 100%. What do you, so this coming up to Tokyo, this will be your third Olympics. And you've already got a silver and a bronze. So you've medaled the previous two in London and Rio. With COVID, with maybe just your past experience, like what do you think is going to be different going into Tokyo? And what are you do you have expectations or it's obviously going to be different in some regard. What are you kind of thinking?
Yeah. It's going to be different in every regard, I think. I feel very fortunate that I got to experience the London and Rio Olympics because I think what makes the Olympics is also everything outside of the competition, and not only the competition and the magnitude of the event and the crowds and the TV and all of that, but the village life, going to see other events, being surrounded by the Olympic athletes is a very special experience. So I'm lucky I did get to experience that because Tokyo will be very different. We're expecting that we'll fly in 5 days before our event. Normally we're there 2 to 3 weeks before to train on the course. So this will be very much get in just 5 days before and then leave 2 days after.
Wow.
Our event is finished. No other events, no, socializing, no going out into the city. It'll be very much, village venue and competition, and that's kind of it. So I guess for me, that's I'm okay with that. I'm very, still driven and motivated and excited by the Olympics, and very performance driven and want to get there and do my best. But yeah, it'll be very different. Obviously, a lot of COVID tests in between, and quarantine on the way home. So it's going to be a very different games for everyone, athletes, officials. The good thing, I think, is that we'll probably get the most people watching on TV that we've ever had, since we probably won't have many spectators in the stands. So I think if they pull it off, it'll still be an amazing achievement, because a lot of people are skeptical about it going ahead. And I'm crossing my fingers everything continues the way it is and we can get to the Olympics, and that, the world does improve in terms of the numbers and everyone gets to compete. So we'll see.
Awesome. Well, we will see. But if it happens, we'll be watching over here and cheering you on for sure.
Thank you.
When you're kind of getting into, whether it's a world championships or whether it's the Olympics or any major event, how do you kind of get into the right mental state? Are you listening to like music? Are you calming down? Are you getting pumped up? Kind of what's your like pre-race routine a little bit?
I think I'm kind of either two ways. I'm really excited and nervous and jittery, and I need to just bring it down a bit, or I'm really mellow and I need to like pump myself up. So I kind of have learnt to figure out what works for when. I think for the Olympics, it'll be more the nerves and excitement and, trying to tone myself down a bit. So when it's like that, I just try and do a bit of stretching, listen to some mellow music, and just sort of focus on the race plan, visualize my race run, talk to other people, just to sort of distract myself a little bit. And then I have a pretty set routine of, pre-warm-up activation where I do some, jumps and stretching and dynamic movements, and then a set warm-up that I can kind of adapt to any course. And then, you get onto the conveyor belt and you get to the start pool and it's go time. So having that routine of, breath work and positive self-talk and visualization is really important. And I'm sure, you've experienced it when you've got, I think for what we do, it's very different to when you're in a situation where if you don't get that boof right, you're going to be in trouble and you've got to be switched on and in the zone. For us, it's like you hit a gate, you're not as fast as you should have been. So it's not life or death. But getting into that zone of that flow state is really important to feel so effortless, to feel like, you're using the water exactly like you should be. You're getting that natural speed and everything flows well. So that's always the goal, is to get into that flow state.
That's very cool. Like when you're actually racing out there, are you going like at 100% max out, or do you kind of hold it back and kind of, I don't know, finesse it a little bit more? Or like kind of where's your line? Just like I know in the races that I've done in the past, I personally do better if I just under. Yeah. If I go to 100%, I make mistakes.
Yeah, like 88% is the sweet spot.
Yeah.
It's like, and everyone's always like, I gave 110%. And I'm like, yeah, mentally I was there 110%, but physically I've got to just be a bit under as well, because when I'm too maxed out, my strokes aren't as efficient. My body isn't, I'm too tense. And I think that affects, the way the boat reacts and the way I get the gates. And also a good sign for me when I watch the video is if I'm grimacing. Like if my face is quite calm, composed, I know I'm in the right sort of level of physical, mental exertion. Whereas if I'm really grimacing and like grunting, the finish line, that's the exception, but throughout the run, then I know I'm probably a little bit over. So yeah, for me, it's a bit under, just so that I know my strokes are efficient and that I've got the glide that I need and that I'm composed enough to be able to get the gates right. And sometimes you do need to, inject speed and inject power. So you've got to have that buffer.
Right. I totally agree with everything that you're saying. And that's kind of been my experience too, where
Yeah.
if I pull it down just a little bit, I have better technique, better strokes. But then also, if something were to happen, whether I like hit a wave and it breaks over my bow or something, I've got that like almost reserve
Yeah.
energy a little bit to like kick it back up if I need to. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And then, I mean, in the last 5 seconds, it can get ugly and you can go to 100%. That's okay.
Oh, for sure. Like when you see the finish line and it's like right there, that's
Yeah.
that's the time to put it all on the line. Yeah, I totally agree. So this year going into the Olympics is also the first time that there's going to be K1 and C1 women's, which is super cool. The Olympics obviously are pushing really hard for gender equality, which I'm all for, and I think that's amazing. Though, from my understanding, you're competing in both categories, which I think is a first. Has that ever happened to a slalom athlete before? I don't think any of the men or anybody that I'm aware of has ever competed in more than one discipline.
I think there have been maybe, I know some C1s competed in C2
Oh, right.
in
Okay. Maybe. Yeah.
London and maybe Rio as well. But yeah, for the women, it'll be the first time that we have the two events and that we'll have gender equality at the Olympics. So it is a big moment for all the girls who'll be lining up in that C1 event. And yeah, I'm very excited about that, very proud of that, because we've all worked really hard to get to that point. So it'll be very different for me, this experience as well, because I'm so used to just doing one event at the Olympics, at the two previous Olympics. And it is quite a stretched out program at the Olympics. So I think it's going to be like 3 days of kayak and then 3 days of canoe, whereas often in a World Cup, we have 3 days of racing and we smash out both events
Right.
in that time. So just having extra time will be something that we'll all have to get used to, but I think it's needed when you've got to, recover well and switch off from one event and move on to the next. So yeah, I'm very excited about that and looking forward to being able to represent Australia and do both events.
That's super cool. So, I think you just like have dominated the women's C1 scene. I mean, you've dominated both, but C1 in particular, I feel like you've extra dominated. Do you have a preference between the two of them, or do you like one more than the other one, or I don't know?
Which kid do you prefer? If you're asking someone who's their favorite child.
Oh,
You
that's
don't have to
awesome.
answer that one. I think it just depends on the day for me. Like if some days I'm in my kayak and I'm like, oh, this is sick. I'm like nailing everything. I can do sweep ups and it just feels so good to have two blades. And then other days I'm like, oh, I wish I was in the canoe because the bow is way lighter because I don't have my legs out in front. And
Interesting.
in the canoe, I feel really smooth and I use the water a lot more. Whereas kayak, I'm kind of powering through a bit more because I have the two blades. So they're different for me. I like them for different reasons. And it just, depends on the day really. Sometimes I like them both. Sometimes I favor one over the other, but it is nice to have that balance. I've had it since I started really. I did canoe from 2009, 2010 competitively. So it's something I've always done. So I've enjoyed that.
Do you think that you gain, I don't know, like an extra advantage in the other discipline because of one more than the other? Like, do you get more out of like training your kayak and then going into C1 and having that practice, or more vice versa, like from training C1 and then using that in your kayak?
I tend to do all the physical work in the kayak. So if I've got to do a hard flat water session, usually I'll jump in the kayak because I can go further and go faster and push harder as well, physically, lactic wise. But I find that if I work in the canoe, when I get into the kayak, I'm really conscious of my edges a lot more and I try and use the water a lot more. And I've noticed this year that I've tried to implement the way I paddle in C1 a bit more in the kayak in terms of my edges and the way I keep the blade in the water. So I think I definitely benefit from doing C1. And we've seen a lot of girls pick up the canoe and just do it for training because they feel like there is some benefit to just having one blade and having to figure it out and be more efficient with the strokes.
That's super cool. No, I totally agree with that, and it makes perfect sense to me. And I've done C1 a little bit, like very poorly. But I felt the same thing where you're forced
Yeah.
to just have better edge control and balance and all that kind of stuff. And essentially that's why I was
And
asking.
timing.
Timing,
Like
yeah.
better stroke timing, like because you've only got that one stroke to do what you would do with two in a kayak, so you've got to be more efficient. Yeah.
Yeah, I always
That's
am.
cool.
Yeah, I'm just like mind blown and amazed watching the C1 paddlers in the Olympics, in like extreme racing, anywhere, because you guys just do such amazing skill work where I'm like, man, I don't think I'd be able to do that with just one paddle blade. That's crazy.
I think in kayak we get a bit lazy, or maybe complacent is the right word, just knowing that you've got that safety of the other blade to get you out of trouble or to power through something. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. What would be one of your I don't know, best advice for like an up and coming athlete, especially like a junior woman or something like that looks up to you and wants to kind of follow your footsteps? What advice would you have for a young athlete that wants to either pursue kayaking, pursue the Olympic dream, anything like that?
Yeah, I think to really be open-minded and try different things. For us, one thing I would have loved to do more of is more rivers, more river running, more, I guess, creeking as well, because I think that brings a lot to the way you paddle. One of my teammates, Kayak, she does a lot of big whitewater, and I can just see the benefit in her paddling in slalom as well. So when you're young, I think that's the time to try different things, to try kayak, canoe, try, some river running. I think it really builds your skills if you're in paddling. And then in terms of, chasing the Olympic dream, it's really hard in some sports, especially ours, when there's only one per country that can go to the Olympics. I think it's very cutthroat, and it's more about that journey to get there of personal improvement and challenging yourself every day to be the best athlete you can be, and knowing that there's going to be average sessions and bad days, but the consistency is what's important. And something we always work on in our sessions is, you could have 50 minutes of average bad paddling, but if the last 5-10 minutes you learn something or you finish on a high note, then it's not a wasted session. You've done something good today that you can be proud of. So always trying to look for those positives even on the bad day.
That's awesome. I love that. With the Olympic dream and chasing that, you hear a lot of athletes that say, there's 4 years of my life, or maybe many more, were like dedicated to this moment. The Olympics are done, and then they're kind of like lost of like, well, now what? Have you thought much about that? Like, do you have like a vision of what your next 3-5 years looks like? Or is it kind of like, I'm just focused on Tokyo and who knows what's after that?
Yeah, they call that like the Olympic blues. It's that post event sort of depression or lull where you've been building up to this moment and investing everything into it, and then suddenly it's that release of, now what? There's nothing as exciting, or it's 4 years away. And that, I think, something that a lot of athletes struggle with the postponement of these Olympics was that, we were so close and now it's just been moved again. And for some athletes, they wanted to retire. Or I think for me, I always try and look big picture, and I didn't feel those emotions with London or Rio because I knew I was pushing on to Tokyo, and I still had more that I was trying to achieve and improve. And I think for me, it's the constant learning and knowing that I feel like I have more to learn and more potential out there. So that constant challenge. And I see myself going on to Paris. So I think this year will be different as well, in that we've got a World Championships at the end of the year, if it goes ahead. So that's kind of, the Olympics will be done, but then there's another thing to look forward to or to train for, and having a goal. But I also think it's important for athletes to have something else and to prepare for life after sport and that transition, because, we're not athletes forever, and we're not NBA players earning millions either. So I think, setting yourself up is important, thinking about it, not necessarily investing and spreading yourself too thin. But for me, study is important, or branching out and working with different brands and kind of getting an idea for where I might like to end up afterwards is important.
Very, very cool. That's been awesome. Thank you for all of your insight on the Olympics and everything, Jess. I'm going to move us on to the next section of the show that I call the fire round, and just ask a couple quick questions that I ask all of our guests. Jess, do you have a favorite quote that you live by?
Oh, that's a hard one. I really love the quote that's about rivers, and it's like, a river cuts through rock, not through sheer power, but persistence. And I think that kind of connects with us, with what we do and life, and just if you've got a goal and you're working towards something, knowing that, you know, a river makes its way through rock, not because it's super powerful, but because it's constantly pushing. It's constantly gonna get through.
That's amazing. I actually haven't heard that quote before, and I love it.
I don't know who said it.
That's amazing. No, it obviously it touches me, being that we're talking about water and rivers, but I totally agree 100% that persistence is, I mean, you can really, anything can happen if you just stick at it and just never give up. Very, very cool. What would be one lesson that maybe you've learned recently, whether it's through failure or success?
Whew, you're asking the big questions here. I think, sorry, can you repeat that? So what's a lesson that I've learned through failure or success?
Yeah.
I think the biggest one I've learned is learning to regulate your emotions and learning to switch off. So, you know, I've had a really bad race, and the example I'll use is the 2017 World Championships, where I was the favorite to win and I had +6 in penalties, and I ended up 5th or 6th, I think. And I was devastated, and I was out there to get my 3rd consecutive world title. And it was just like buckled under pressure. Being able to get over that, what felt devastating at the time, and just disconnect and come back the next day and win that world title in the kayak, is probably one of the biggest lessons I learned around regulating your emotions and coming down after a loss or a win. You know, even with the wins, you've got to come back down to and be grounded. So I think learning to regulate your emotions has been a big one in my career, and that might be through breath work or through journaling or whatever it is, but that's something that I think will help me throughout life as well, whatever the setback.
Very, very cool. And that, I mean, again, another great lesson. Thanks so much for sharing that. I've had very similar scenarios with competing and with results and all that kind of stuff. And it can be very difficult to regulate those emotions. So that's cool that you were able to do that between the two different disciplines. Do you have a favorite book or podcast or anything that either you've read or listened to that's kind of inspired you along the way?
I love reading, but I'm really bad at like being impacted and just remembering one book that I've loved. But I do love reading like athlete biographies or anything around mindset or, personal growth and different people's journeys and experiences. I think we can always learn from different people and people from outside your circle or your industry. I think it's always important to be a sponge and open your mind and take a bit from everyone. So love books, love podcasts. I think I enjoyed Michael Gervais' Finding Mastery podcast. I mean, you've got to have the time, and sometimes I just skip a bit because there's a lot of talking sometimes, but he's talked to a lot of people, and I guess around mindset I am drawn to that, to learn about how people perform under pressure or bring their best in scenarios that, could be life or death. So what else? In Australia, there's a couple, Seize the Yay podcast in Australia. Yeah, sorry, I don't have a specific one.
No, that's great. Have you ever read the book Thinking Body, Dancing Mind?
No,
it's a phenomenal book, and it's all about mindset within competing and stuff like that. And I was introduced to it actually from Jason Craig, who read it right before he won the world championships. And then I have pass that on to many different athletes that have had great success, either medaling or winning world championships afterwards. Great book.
Wow.
Highly would recommend.
I'll have to. Thinking Body,
Dancing Mind. Yeah.
I recently read Think Like a Monk by Jay Shetty.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've read that one. That was interesting. Like, I really liked the analogies around his experiences living with as a monk and sort of the Buddhist and all those philosophies and the different stories that they get lessons from. I enjoyed that too.
Yeah,
I'll look into that one.
Thinking Body, Dancing Mind is definitely like they kind of pull the Eastern, Eastern philosophies, but the whole thing is written around like sports psychology and competing. It's a pretty cool book, and I gained a lot from it, and I don't know, maybe you will or not, but check it out for sure.
Thanks for the tip.
No worries. If today was your last day on Earth and everything that you've done, here's another whopper for you. But if today's your last day on Earth and everything that you've done, all the events, all the medals, all the accolades, everything would be erased, and all you were left with is a piece of paper and a pen, and you could leave 3 truths. Whether this is for your younger sister, for friends, maybe for younger athletes that are out there that look up to you. All you can do is leave them 3 things that you believe to be true. What would those 3 things be?
I was listening to a podcast where they asked a question similar to this, and I remember feeling stressed about, imagine if someone asked me this question, what would I answer? How do you dilute it into just 3 truths? I think I would keep it pretty simple, and I would say that just kindness, like just be kind, be patient, and be generous, be giving. So always, show compassion and help if you can, because that comes back to you as well, I believe. I would say that if you have like a purpose, or if you've got a bigger goal or vision, that you can do anything and you'll be fulfilled if you're willing to work hard and surround yourself with the right people. So that sort of that purpose, that why, that vision piece is probably important. And have fun. Like, don't be too serious. I don't know, keep it simple. I think we sometimes get really bogged down with the details or with comparison, or just like stay in your lane and be inspired by others, but have fun and enjoy yourself as well.
I love that.
The fact that you've said if it's your last day, I'm like, I need to have more fun today. Like,
I love it. And I think that I think you're having a lot of fun out there. It definitely looks like you're having fun. And this has been just an amazing interview. Thank you so much for your time. Jess, one of the things that I like to do when I do these interviews is I try to add as much value as I can. So is there anything that you're focusing on that maybe I could personally help with, or possibly my listeners?
Yeah, well, I guess now that we were on the topic of like mindset, and what's your routine if you've got if you're running a river or you're doing a competition and it's big white water and I'm assuming you feel fear still, because like it's what you guys do, it blows my mind. How do you get into that? Like, do you guys visualize? Do you just run with it? Is there a gut feeling that makes you pull out at the last second? Like, what's your process?
So if we're talking mainly like big water or in a kind of more life or death scenario, like versus maybe like a freestyle, like they're definitely very different mindsets for me. But when I hear that question like that, I'm thinking like North Fork Championships, or just like, something really pretty big and consequential. No question that I do a lot of visualization, and I mean, I'll spend a long time visualizing, and that happens both when I'm just like river running as well, running waterfalls, anything like that. Like, I have to see it very clearly in my mind, the whole line, and envision, doing it. And if I start like envisioning and having this mindset of like, bad lines, then that to me is usually a gut instinct of like, maybe today is a good time to walk, or maybe I'm just like, I'm not feeling it for me today. And I just now, after years of experience and maybe not listening to my gut instinct earlier on, but knowing that I have to kind of trust that gut instinct as well.
Yeah.
And then also just kind of being willing to go with the moment. And again, for me, when there's kind of more consequential, rapids or waterfalls or anything like that, I'm kind of probably drawn more into what can be a flow state, but I'm only doing that if I kind of just like let go and tell myself like, okay, I've got this experience. I know what I'm doing. I now envision the line clear enough that I know that I can make this like 99% of the time, or at least that's how I'm feeling it, like that confident. Then I just kind of just drop in and I try to really relax and just like let go into the moment. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
The
yeah,
relaxed peak.
yeah, so that's just me personally. I don't know if other people like. I was at a race once, and Pat Keller was at the start, and he was like, "Let's get pumped up, like here we go." And I was just thinking, like, dude, I'm trying to chill out. Like I'm just like, it was just
Just
such
let
a
me meditate for 5 seconds.
yeah, exactly, such a different mindset.
Yeah.
But yeah, for me personally, I've got to kind of like calm down. I find that if I get too pumped up, I get anxious. And when I'm anxious is when I'm like pushing that like 100% when really I got to pull it back to like what you were saying, maybe like an 80% or something.
Yeah. And what about like because we get this in slalom in that, if you make a mistake on gate one, and I've hit gate one so many times in my career and then gone on to do a really good run. But if I've hit like gate 10, sometimes my focus kind of drifts a bit and then I might snowball and make other mistakes. So do you ever find that, if you make a mistake, then you kind of accumulate them? And how do you not let that happen? Like, how do you stay present and go, okay, yep, that wasn't the right line. I've got to really fight to get back online, or I've got this.
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess the first thing that comes to mind is the rapid, like it's not numbered as well as it is with the gates.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit harder, but usually if I make a mistake, I'm quick and there's no question that anxiety quickly builds where it's like, oh, you got to get back. Like now we're offline. We're like trying to make up time, trying to like, I don't know, it's harder for sure. And I would say no matter what, when I make mistakes, even if I finish and it's great, it's usually not the same as like when it was just obviously like a clean line. And I would imagine it's the same when you're racing and you've just got a perfectly clean run. You feel pumped, and it's different than if you were to hit gate one, even if you had a comeback.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a lot of the same thing where you're just like, you're almost focused on like just getting back, finishing and kind of focusing harder, maybe a little bit more.
I think, the consequences are more severe for you guys. So I think you kind of got to be like focused to just carry on, but finish it.
Right. And I think you're 100% correct that the higher the consequence, the quicker it is to like, I mean, I don't know, for me anyway, if it's like, if I'm about to go into a sieve or an undercut or something like that, there is no like being lazy. There's no like, oh, I can't believe I screwed up. It's like, no, get over it, like get out of there, get back online. Cause things are going to go bad if not, but, yeah, it's, I don't know, a little bit different. Yeah.
No, it's always cool to compare, like, cause we do a similar sport, but it's not exactly the same sport. Like the mental side, we can always learn from other people. It's always cool.
No, it's very cool. And I've done like a little bit of slalom, but it's not, I mean, I wouldn't even really say what I do slalom. I've paddled a slamlon boat and I've raced some slalom races, but people.
And you do slalom, that's all it is.
Yeah, it is. But people are always like, wow, dude, you were fast. Like, but man, your technique is horrible. Like, I'm like, yeah, I know. I got to work on that. Anyway, it's super fun. And huge respect to just the skill that you guys have and the power, and watching you out there. Before this podcast, I watched a whole bunch of your runs, and I think it was the 2019, your winning run there maybe that I was watching. And it was just like blowing me away with just the tight lines, the in and out of those upstreams and stuff like that. It's you guys all have some amazing skill that I think, I would wish that I could one time in my life just have some sort of like boat control to be able to pull some of that stuff off. So mad respect for that. And thank you so very much. Oh, well, thank you. But thanks so much for your time and your insight. And I wish you huge success going into Tokyo and the 21 Olympics and the World Championships this fall as well. So thank you, and thanks for sharing all that stuff and just kind of giving us a little bit of insight into your training, into your experience and all that stuff. And for all my listeners out there, please, if you guys got some value out of this, because I myself personally did, I'm sure that you guys did. If you guys could share this out with one person that also might want to just hear about Jess's story, gain some insight, some knowledge, and yeah, just learn from it. Share this out with one friend. That's all I'm asking. Share it out with one person, whether you throw it up on your social media, text it to a friend, anything like that. I would greatly appreciate it. And also tune into the Olympics and let's all cheer Jess on out there, because we're not going to be there in person. So we'll be watching and rooting from social media, I guess. But
Scream
yeah,
at the TV.
exactly. We wish you the best and all the success out there. I'm Nick Troutman signing off, wishing you guys all an awesome day. Cheers.